Chapter 19 Feverish and Nauseous. Ariel. The fire in the hearth was working overtime to warm up a room which hadn't expected to host a guest so soon, especially not a prince used to southern room temperatures. They had gathered in the prince's solar in an attempt to keep the discussion private, and now Aemond, Ariel, Hagrid, Cregan and Ellard sat around the fireplace so the two travelers could keep warm after their long journey. Aemond had changed into fresh clothes brought along from home for the search, as well as a fur cloak lent from the stocks while his travel gear dries. Dragon riding was hard on the body, especially a long trip to the north. The freezing temperatures of the altitude and the exertion from clinging onto a dragon for hours was a harrowing strain. Even with the heat radiating from Norwood's body, it had been the coldest and hardest flight Ariel had undertaken, and Hagrid and Aemond were of a similar mind, though at least they hadn't flown the whole trip in one go. I knew where to go because of the compass, but I got so damn unwell from the flying I had to take several breaks and slept for the night in the Vale, inside the chest. Hagrid gestured to the expandable chest he was using for a chair, seeing as little else within the room could be trusted to hold his weight. Aemond was able to follow Hagrid's logic, but Cregan and Ellard exchanged a confused glance. Before they could ask what the hell that meant, the conversation moved onwards. Then we set off early and flew the rest of the way to Winterfell today, Hagrid said. No one saw you leave Dragonstone with her? Aemond asked. Within the shelter of Winterfell, dry, warming up and with some food in his stomach, Aemond's brittle mood had improved, the worst of his biting tone tempering into something more patient. Nor did you inform Rhaenyra of your intentions. Was a bit impulsive to tell you the truth. Some might have seen her fly off, Vhagar is not a small dragon, but no one were around when I climbed her. People know I go down to Vhagar from time to time though. I'm the only one who's allowed to work on her wings. Oh? Aemond made a curious sound, and Hagrid clarified. Aye, she's got several old injuries that never healed quite right. You can see it when she flies. There's several tears in her wings. They slow her down and it starts annoying her when she flies for too long. I've been binding some of the damage up. Aemond cleared his throat and sniffed. And you've never mounted her before now? Nah, I hated flying Caraxes and it was a little better with Vhagar. Gets so bloody nauseous I do. I had to take loads of breaks coming up here. But Ariel was missing and I had to make sure she was safe, so what else was I supposed to do? Yes, what else? Aemond mused quietly. I can empathize with your concern for Lady Ariel. Securing her safety brought me far out of my way too. His expression remained so carefully controlled Ariel didn't know if he was being sarcastic or not. I did not make the trip in one flight either, but I've been traveling for days anyhow. We had no reference for where you'd flown off to, Lady Ariel, so we spread out. Aegon flew towards the Westerlands, Helena above the Crownlands, Rhaenys towards the Stormlands, Daemon towards the Reach and Sir Laenor over the Vale, leaving me with the Riverlands. What? So many? Aemond had mentioned something about all able dragon riders were searching, but somehow Ariel hadn't truly understood that meant all of them. You are an inexperienced dragon rider who only mounted Norbert a few moons ago. We had no knowledge of where you'd flown off to or what had become of you. Inexperienced? I've flown before, Ariel muttered, embarrassed the little adventurer was causing such a stir. One trip on Caraxes years ago hardly counts, Aemond argued, swallowing as if he had a dry throat. Though after the first fruitless search I slept at Harrenhal where the castellan, Simon Strong, told me a blue dragon and its dark-haired rider was seen the day you went missing, so I kept searching the Riverlands the next day until I landed at the Twins, where Lord Forrest Frey was delighted to host the prince. It was just after I left the following morning that I saw Vhagar in the distance, and trailed them here to Winterfell. Aemond frowned, his purple eyes studying the shape in the fire. I kept my distance, unsure if Vhagar was flying riderless or not. I am touched by everyone's concern, but this is all a misunderstanding, my prince, Ariel insisted. Norbert is a cold-weather dragon. You know she's different, and she took me along to explore the snow. I sent a raven back to Dragonstone as soon as I could, though I never imagined my absence would have such repercussions. Why would they not? Cregan asked, grey eyes catching hers. It was fortunate we found you, my lady, but they could not know you'd been so fortunate. How could they not fear for you? Flustered, Ariel ducked her head. Alright, so maybe she'd been abandoned by a dragon in a cold, foreign country at night, left to wander through a snowy forest for the nearest settlement. But Norbert knew Ariel was tough. Sure, it'd have been very dangerous for most others, but Ariel had magic, and a lot of experience being dropped completely unprepared into bizarre situations. You were alone, cold, exhausted, and lost, Ellard said dryly. We saved you and have kept you safe since. That was putting it on a bit thick, wasn't it? That's not quite how Ariel remembered it. Indeed. Aemon smiled placidly at the Lord of Winterfell. How fortunate you were there to aid Lady Ariel in her hour of need. Ariel sighed and looked pointedly at Aemon. Need I remind you how Hagrid and I first came across Prince Daemon in the hills of Norvos? That was before I had a dragon big enough to ride. I did not believe my temporary absence would result in a larger search, when you know I'm not as helpless as others would be in a similar situation. Not to mention such behavior in dragons isn't unheard of. Ariel was about to explain how sometimes dragons had desires of their own too, but Aemon cut that off quickly. Not with experienced riders, he protested pointedly, leaning forwards. Rhaenyra was remiss to make you fly without supervision. Pardon, but I'm an excellent flyer. I made the trip from Harrenhal to Hornwood without a single stop. In the moon since I first mounted Norbert, I've been flying more than all the other riders in Dragonstone combined. They didn't share my interest in spending so many hours flying, and this is the first incident where anything's happened. Aemon's mouth twisted up at the corner. Regardless of your prowess, it went wrong, did it not? Look where we are. If my half-sister was too engaged with other matters to see to your safety, you should have come to stay at the capital instead. Aemon rebuffed. My siblings and I are in the air most days and would have gladly flown with you. Would you? Ariel was rather dubious. I was told by both your sisters how busy it has been at the Red Keep of late. I did not wish to impose on your family's reunion with Prince Daeron, nor be a distraction from all the important matters your family is occupied with in regards to your siblings' betrothals. There's also the law prohibiting free-roaming dragons in the capital, and since Norbert has never been chained that way before, I don't see how that would have been feasible. Aemon cleared his throat again. My prince, Cregan said, is your throat bothering you? Fine, Aemon said reflexively. You've had a long journey, and forgive me for saying so, but you appear flushed. May I suggest you retire early? We can continue this conversation when you feel better, Cregan said. As if to be contrary, Aemon opened the collar of his borrowed fur. It's only the uncomfortable layers. Are you sure that is all? Ariel added, catching on to what Cregan already had. Aemon's flushed face could be explained by several things, but he was becoming clammy too. His voice sounded off and he kept clearing his throat. Was Aemon getting a cold? I will call for the maester, Ellard said, getting up. It will pass, Aemon protested, his face growing redder still. Send for a warm beverage instead of your grey rat. I think old Cregan is right. You're getting sick, Prince Aemon, Hagrid said, squinting at the pale-haired teen. You should get to bed. Maybe eat some soup. I brought a chest along, so you're welcome to borrow the bathroom too. There's a tub there that's better than anything you've got in your red castle. Just give me a second and I'll see what I've got down there. Any chance of further conversation was derailed from there, both by Cregan and Ellard's alarm that Hagrid climbed into his own wooden chest, the abrupt appearance of Fang jumping out alongside Aemon's stubborn conviction that he was not sick. He was so adamant about this he stood up angrily, got dizzy from the movement and nearly fell over. Aemon deteriorated fast and spent his first night at Winterfell fighting a high fever. The dragons are very warm, which assists our comfort while we fly. Without it we'd freeze, Ariel explained the next morning, unenthusiastically poking at her scrambled egg. Just think of how cold mountain tops are, and it only gets colder the higher we fly. The clouds are wet with unshed rain and the sky above them are always as cold as the northern winters. Considering the prince flew for hours in worsening conditions, his illness may not be so unexpected. Yet you and Rubius Hagrid made the same journey, Cregan said, who had made space for both Hariel and Hagrid by his side at the table that morning. Yet neither of you fell ill. Cregan had a point, but what could Hariel say? Hagrid is sturdy. His resistance to the elements are great, and even magic can't move him the way it can men, while I was probably only very fortunate. We pray the prince's fever breaks soon, Bernard Stark remarked on Cregan's other side, speaking a sentiment that had been repeated a lot that morning. Fevers could be deadly here, and having a sick prince under their roof was making the Starks very nervous. This is an ill omen to arrive on our doorstep right before your name day feast, nephew. Quite, Cregan said tightly. Ill omen? Rubbish, Hagrid said, looking down at Bernard incredulous. I feel for the poor lad, but that isn't any sort of omen. Just cold weather, poor clothing and exhaustion. It's a bad combination and can knock out even the best of us. Aren't you a Stark? Shouldn't you know how winter weather works by your age? Cregan bit his bottom lip, fighting not to laugh as he caught Hariel's eyes. Later that day, Hariel went to see how Aemond was faring for herself, though her welcome was significantly cooler than she was used to from him. Get out, Aemond slurred, pulling his fur over his head once he realized Hariel was there. Shouldn't be in. He trailed off into something completely intangible. Under most circumstances, Hariel wouldn't be allowed into the prince's bedchamber, but Aemond was sick, stuck in a foreign country surrounded by complete strangers, and it's not like she was in there alone. The maester had been by throughout the night and had just gone to have a nap before continuing his duties. Otherwise, Osric was standing guard in the corner, and there was always a servant in the room tasked with watching over Aemond, either adjusting his blankets and furs, read to him for entertainment and to keep track of his condition. How are you feeling? 7 hells. Just go, Aemond begged. Osric made to follow the prince's order, but Hariel held up her hand. I brought tea. Aemond waved a dismissive hand, still hiding his face under the covers. He was like a cat, instinctively hiding away to lick his wounds in private. Very unlike a dog, as Hariel had seen Fang run headfirst into a tree and then climb onto Hagrid's lap for comfort to make things better. Already had red tea, Aemond muttered, sounding half asleep. Hariel snickered. This is not the Maester's tea, it's Hagrid's. Aemond peeked his head up. Magical tea? He asked in slurred Valyrian. Tea from Britain, Hariel said bemused. But it's made from rare herbs, so that makes it a little magical. Fine. With a groan he waved her forwards, and Hariel brought the tea tray around his 4-poster and placed it next to the Aemond-shaped blankets. It seemed Aemond needed to gather his strength to simply sit up, and Hariel was just about to ask if he needed help when he started to struggle, resurfacing like a climbing ghost from underneath the layers of woolen blankets and furs he'd been buried under. Hagrid is looking after Vermivor, Hariel said, keeping the Valyrian since she doubted either Osric or the maid knew it, as she might have had ulterior motives by coming here. Of course, Hariel wished Aemond would recover too, but there were several important issues dangling in the air, and if there was even the slightest chance that she could get ahead of it, she had to try. Though neither Vermivor or Vhagar enjoys the cold the way Norbert does. Aemond struggled up into a sitting position, coughing, sniffing and grumbling. His thick silver hair was a knotted mess, his sickly pallor covered in a thin sheen of sweat. His nose was red, shirt ruffled and his eyes drooping and bloodshot. Hariel had never seen Aemond look this shitty, and courtesy of Vhagar's fire, she'd seen him post-roast. And about Hagrid, Hariel trailed off, unsure how to start. He should never have flied. Aemond closed his eyes, dragging a hand over his brow. Flight Vhagar. She belongs to House Targaryen, I know. Ariel finished the sentence for him. I understand how upsetting the shock must have been. I was almost struck speechless myself. She picked up the goblet and put it directly into his hand, fearing he might spill it otherwise. Aemond was able to drink it on his own, though it was unnerving to see him so weak. She watched him struggle, thinking it had been a while since she looked down on him. Though 14 and gangly, Aemond had bypassed Ariel's height a while ago and was now amongst the tallest of his family. Hagrid only meant to help me. He cherishes all dragons and doesn't view bonding with a dragon the same as your family does. To tend to Vhagar better, and he never considered flying her before he feared for my life. It was only a means to find me. You heard him, he doesn't enjoy flying. He gets sick. Would you please try to understand? He's broken the law, Aemond murmured, taking a second slip while gazing at her with bloodshot eyes over the edge of the goblet. Oh, so you all took it for granted Hagrid would keep using magic of our lands to hatch dragons for your house, care for them, feed them and do nearly all the work for you, but do not share your own magic in return? Ariel asked pointedly. That made him pause. We've given you plenty. Shelter, food, education, protection. The life you live is by the generosity of my house. His fever caused his speech to be slow, nasally, and halted by breaks, sounding like his nose remained utterly inaccessible to him. Generosity. Is a trait generous when our payment has been far less valuable than the services we've completed for House Targaryen? Ariel said, trying to speak with conviction. She was right about this, though it was a different matter to bring it up. Ariel almost lost her nerve, but then Aemond arched a brow, looking almost amused. Don't stop there. Speak your solicit plainly. He egged her on. I do not dispute that an education, clothes and shelter are valuable arrangements, but don't take me for a fool, Aemond. They're mere pennies compared to the gold we've offered. I know the king has given knights, lands and castles for far less meaningful achievements than Hagrid's services, yet all he's been given is a house next to his daughter's castle. We have not brought the matter to the court because we wanted this alliance. All we wanted was peace and safety. Yet the one time Hagrid believed that compromised and needed help from a dragon, you named him a lawbreaker. Does none of his achievements earn him clemency or some understanding? Was all that effort not worth as much as a soul trip to the north? Aemond was too occupied drinking his tea without spilling it down his front to respond right away. Regardless of how honorable his intentions were, it will not be enough, Aemond rasped, putting down the goblet on the tray with minimal trembling. Hagrid's actions has made it so Vhagar can no longer be claimed by another, not while he lives. It sounds like a threat, Ariel said tightly. I only speak the truth, how they'll see it. We both know it. Aemond seemed to be a little sorry to say it, but wouldn't take it back either. Ariel glared. Who would even claim Vhagar? Princess Rhaenyra's unborn child? When thanks to Hagrid's efforts, House Targaryen has several young dragons with outriders to pick from instead. He's the best dragon handler your house will ever know, Ariel said with feeling, picking up the tray. Perhaps that's something to keep in mind, my prince. She marched out of the room, not sure if she just made the situation worse or not. Though Aemond didn't show for supper that evening, the Maester was pleased to inform everyone his fever was going down. By the following morning, Aemond showed up in the Great Hall instead of having breakfast served in bed. Confined to his room since his arrival, this was the first time most of the household had seen Aemond properly. Hushed whispering broke out around the hall when he strolled in, taking Hagrid's abandoned seat in between Cregan and his uncle Bernard, opposite from Ariel, who'd sat at this end of the table for a second day in a row. Everyone in Winterfell is relieved to see you recovered from your ailment, Prince Aemond. But are you sure you are well enough to be up? Cregan inquired once Aemond had told the servant his breakfast order. Though visibly improved, Aemond still suffered a runny nose that didn't seem at full strength, but he waved away any suggestion to take it easy. Enough so to be bored still with staring at the ceiling of my 4-poster bed while listening to Norvan stories. I think I've had enough of Rat Cooks, Danny Flint, Ground Kings and Children of the Forest and Skin Changers for a while. Skin Changers? Ariel asked as the term sounded quite morbid. Aemond rolled his eyes. Skin Changers are what the tales call Northerners who could magically enter the minds of beasts and live as the animal. You might have heard of the term warg from songs at home. It sounds very much like the same fairy tale. Ariel nodded in recognition. She had heard of wargs in a few Northern songs told by the Maester of Dragonstone, of people who could control birds and beasts by entering the animal's mind, and it had reminded her slightly of what the Targaryens did with dragons. It wasn't the same, as wargs had complete control of the animal while the Targaryens had a partnership with their dragons, but it was similar enough that it caught her attention. Were the tales too grim for you, my prince? Cregan wondered. I could try to find someone who knows tales of brave knightly deeds, but it's only a small minority who's seen a knight in Winterfell, so I'd wager your own stories of Southern courts and tourneys superior. Aemond scowled. I don't give a shit about tourneys, Lord Cregan, and I can hear grim stories any day. Maegor the Cruel was my great-great-grand-uncle. While I'm here, I'd rather see the North than hear of it, and I was told there's to be a name day feast this eve. We were going to postpone it until you were recovered enough to participate, Cregan said. Then it wouldn't be your name day anymore, would it? My 6th and 10th name day passed a fortnight ago, but I was on the road at the time. Regardless, I'm on the mend, and there's a few affairs I didn't feel comfortable leaving unattended. Aemond turned to Ariel on the opposite side of the table. I hope the night treated you well, my lady. You look lovely this morn. How's our dragons faring? The server arrived with Aemond's breakfast then, and Ariel waited until the server had finished placing the food before answering. Vermithor took a short flight last evening, but he's returned. Neither Vermithor or Vhagar has much of an appetite, but Hagrid has thoughtfully made them a little more comfortable with fire magic and volcano smells. You only just missed Hagrid before you went to see them, Ariel said. They're in excellent care. You know Hagrid is one of a kind. Aemond made an agreeable humming sound, brushing his hair back from his face. His and Cregan's hair were of a similar length, except the Stark kept his tied back in a low ponytail with a leather string, which made Ariel wonder why none of the Targaryen males did that. Probably because it wasn't in fashion in the south. What about Norbert? Aemond wondered. She's within the castle walls in the east courtyard. Unlike the other dragons, she's been enjoying the snow. Ariel caught Cregan's eye, who grinned, sharing her amusement about the matter. It's a curiosity, Cregan said. Norbert is the first dragon I met, and it made me believe her behavior the norm, but the larger dragons react quite differently to the cold. Ariel leaned forwards. They're different breeds of dragons. Though Norbert did not hatch before we reached Essos, her egg is from my homelands, where she's a mixed breed. The spikes and foam is from one parent, while her blue scales and fire come from a breed of dragon known for dwelling on snowy mountaintops. Is that why she's so adept to northern weather? Cregan asked. We think so, yes. It makes her very aptly named. Oh so? Back home, Norbert means northern brightness. It does. Cregan's face lit up. What a perfect name for your dragon. Ariel beamed. She suspected that Cregan, and most Northerners really, would take a shine to Norbert's name. Hagrid named her, she said. But Norbert is significantly younger as well, and that's also why she acts differently. Vhagar is nearly 180 years old. Vermithor is 90, while Norbert is not yet turned 5. 4! Cregan leaned forwards, eyes alight with surprise. She's only 4? Ariel giggled. She's a very large child. With Cregan's full attention, Ariel found it a struggle not to keep smiling. Betrothed, a weak little voice in the back of her head tried to remind her. He's betrothed. I always knew they were large creatures, but I was never made aware of how fast dragons grow. Not all do, but Norbert is the fastest growing dragon amongst the younger ones. The Norbert's been in Hagrid's care since she hatched, and he knows what's required for a dragon to prosper, she said. And as most children, Norbert enjoys play and exploration, while the older dragons show more maturity. When you explain it so, it makes sense, Cregan agrees. You're hardly eating, my prince. Has your appetite not returned yet? Bernard Stark asked the prince, because Aemond had turned away from Hariel and Cregan's conversation to glare down at his plate, as if the spread of ham, egg, cheese and bread had offended him. Maybe, Aemond muttered. At any rate, something about the meal is nauseating.